New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
New Thought Media Network is pleased to present The Inclusive Church, Ideas and Resources for Leaders of Multicultural Ministries. The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Tuesdays at 12 noon Mountain Time. Join Tracy and her guests as they go deep and share practical tips and resources you can use in your ministry. And now let's explore the Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here, and you are watching The Inclusive Church. Duh. And I hope you, like me, love that little intro before, just for a little dance break. I've been, sitting at my computer for a few hours, and then the music comes on. I'm like, oh yeah, I can dance for 30 seconds and then sit down again. So take a dance break. If not then at some point during the day. Welcome to the Inclusive Church. If this happens to be your first time watching, I just want to give you two kind of guardrails or explain things that people have asked me about. So I was asked, why do you want to call it the Inclusive Church? Like everybody's, not going to church on Sunday mornings and we've got to be inclusive in more ways. And I'm like, wait, stop, hold on. When I use the word church, I am not talking about going to a building. Although you could have church in a building, but you have church, or you can create, expand, and have church any place you have a gathering of people. The church is the people who come together to share and to learn and to practice spiritual principles. And so if we didn't know that before 2020, one of the major lessons for spiritual communities during the pandemic was that, we can't rely on a building or on a certain kind of a building. So that's one thing to keep in mind as I'm talking, because I will use the word church, or I may use the phrase your spiritual community, and I'm not talking about a building. And then the other reminder I always like to give at the top of the show is that I am consistently referring to, here's what you can do as a leader. And I am not saying leader as a synonym with minister. The leader might be, or a leader might be, and hopefully is, a minister. But everyone who has a leadership role, a role in growing the congregation, a role in coordinating a volunteer team, a role in contributing financially, on a regular basis in order to sustain the programming and the activities. So leaders come in all shapes and sizes, all forms, and in many, many, many different roles, in addition to the role of a minister. Okay, that's done. So welcome to this week's show. This week, I am not featuring a guest, a conversation with a guest. Usually 2 or 3 weeks out of each month, I'll be talking to a guest. And 1 or 2 weeks out of the month, I'll be sharing a toolkit episode. So this is a toolkit episode. And today I am focusing on the diversity welcome factor. A few of you have been following me for a long time with the Stained Glass Spirit brand, which began in 2009. And so you may have heard me talk before about the diversity welcome factor. How do you measure the diversity welcome factor that you have in your spiritual community? How are you consciously and intentionally taking care of how you welcome people, and how is your welcoming process welcoming and respectful of all kinds of diversity? There's also the inclusion worship factor. How do you go about and think about how your worship services, right? Your services and events, how are you being inclusive, and what kinds of things could you use to measure that? There's an outrageously outreach process, and there's an unintentionally unwelcome some bullets. But today we're going to focus on the diversity welcome factor. And I'll give you the summary, then I'll go through the details, and then I'll give you the summary again. And my goal is to do this all in 30 minutes, because I'm just trying to give you the highlights, things that you can be thinking about related to the diversity welcome factor, not actually dig in and go through all the detail. So there are 3 factors. There are 3 things that I usually am thinking about when we are evaluating or educating about the diversity welcome factor. 1 is motivation, 2 is management, and 3 is meet and greet. Motivation, management, meet and greet. So if you are building or expanding in your commitment to being an inclusive church, and we are especially focused right now on the diversity welcome factor, how welcome are you to diversity? How welcome is your community to diversity? Now, I'm not talking about individuals except as they fit into these comments that I am making, because I can be a leader in a community, and I personally can be really comfortable with lots of different dimensions of diversity, or people who represent lots of ways that are different from me. But even though I am a leader, I am only one person. So when we're looking at any of these metrics, but especially the diversity welcome factor, as a leader, I'm looking at what systems do I have in place? How have I trained people? What have I set up as an expectation? All of those things. So let's start with motivation. If you want your spiritual community to have a very high diversity welcome factor, then everyone who is involved in welcoming people must understand the motivation behind your commitment to diversity and inclusion, your commitment to value diversity in this case, and what that means. So a few weeks ago, I did an episode that was focused on linking all of your inclusion initiatives and programming to your mission and or your vision that everybody knows, so that people are understanding this isn't just, this isn't just what Tracy thinks is important. This is related to us achieving our mission, or this is related to us demonstrating and moving toward our vision. So if you missed that show, obviously you can go back in the archives or go to the playlist and you can hear what I had to say about that. But this motivation piece is similar. It's linked to that. So if I have a team of people who are the greeters or the ushers or, the welcome team, then I could tell them, here at this spiritual community, we value diversity, and I want you to make sure you welcome everyone. And those are pretty words. And they are probably truthful words. But then you are leaving it to each individual to interpret those words based on their personal values, their personal education, their personal experience, etc. So when we are paying attention to the diversity welcome factor, one of the things that's really important is that we articulate clearly what is our motivation for welcoming and valuing diversity. And again, everyone who really as a part of their way of showing up or as a part of the role that they are playing in your spiritual community needs to understand. And it's important for them to understand that number one, what are you talking about when you say the word diversity? Because I'm shocked how many people, when I say the word diversity, they think I'm talking about racism and all the problems that relate to racism. I'm like, diversity means all the ways we're different from other people, both genetically and culturally. Like when I'm talking about diversity, I'm talking about really everyone. But what happens is for most of us, we only think about, well, who's different from me in a way that I can see or that I know. So that's a good place to start. But you really want to make sure that everyone who's in a greeting role, a hospitality role, etc., understands the motivation and how that motivation for your spiritual community fits directly into the role they are playing. So in my home spiritual community, our purpose statement is to be radically inclusive, spiritually progressive, and transforming lives. And so if I'm working with or engaging with the people who are our greeters, then I'm going to make sure that I have some conversation with them about that we recognize the diversity of all people because we are radically inclusive, and being spiritually progressive, we understand that every single person is a face of God. And because of that, as in your role greeting people, I want you to have in your mind, here comes another face of God. Wow, I get to greet another face of God. Right? I'm going to put it in the context of being radically inclusive. So you have to look at your mission or your purpose or what your spiritual tradition teaches, and then bring that forward and make sure everyone in a greeting or welcoming role understands that this is related to who we are as a spiritual community. It is bigger than your own individual comfort. It is bigger than your own individual preference or desire. It is bigger than your own individual biases. It is bigger than any of that if you are going to be in a welcoming role or a hospitality role in this spiritual community. So that's number one, motivation. Remember, there are three: motivation, management, and meet and greet. So let's go over to management. So if you are the team leader, or if you are the volunteer coordinator, or if you are someone who is coordinating people who are in greeting roles or hospitality roles, there is a piece of the diversity welcome factor that is especially important for you. And that's the management of how people learn about what you expect from them, how people get feedback about whether they are fulfilling the expectation, and how you create accountability both individually and collectively for the whole team. So managing the diversity welcome factor does not happen automatically. It requires intention. And so those three subsets of management: orientation. Are you, when someone new volunteers to be a greeter or volunteers to be on the welcome team, what orientation are you giving them? I talked to someone just a few weeks ago, and they were greeting, and they were amazing. This was not in my home community. I was visiting a community, and they were amazing. And of course, I noticed, and I felt really welcome. And so I asked them, I was like, oh, you all must have I didn't ask them, I commented, you all must have an amazing orientation program for you and for your greeters. And they looked at me really strange, like, what are you talking about? And I was like, do you all, when you volunteered to be on this team, did you go through an orientation? And they said, no, but I really wish we had. And it just so happened that I, was greeted by someone who was amazing, but I wasn't assured that I would get that same attention or energy from other greeters, unless they use her as the role model, right? And so as the person managing that process and the people who are in those roles, really, you need to have an orientation. And that orientation would partially include what I talked about first, which was being clear about the motivation. But it would also include examples of how to demonstrate that priority, because everybody doesn't have that automatic or the same way of interpreting. So in your orientation, you want some examples. That could be examples and stories you share verbally. It could be something in writing that has examples. It could be video, where you video one of your superstar greeters and say, here's an example, not the only way, but an example. Because you've got to go beyond the words and get that energetic. And it is helpful for someone to see what would it look like if someone who was homeless or unsheltered and had not showered for a few days came up. How would you greet them and let them know that they too are welcome here? What does it look like or sound like? What words would you use if someone showed up for an event and a member of your welcome team who is white sees someone coming toward them who is black and wearing their hair in locks or a big afro like me, and they don't know this person, and maybe they haven't been around a lot of people who are African American or black, and maybe a little nervous. What does it look like to greet authentically and welcome people into your spiritual community? What does it look like? Someone asked me this. This was maybe a year and a half ago, and I don't know why it just popped into my mind. But somebody asked me, how did I expect them to not stare and be confused if someone who's a trans female and is 5'11" probably, but has on 3-inch heels and they're over 6 foot tall. I mean, I'm gonna stare at them. Well, my first answer was stare at them with love and welcome. Now let's have a real conversation about that. What's your discomfort? And let's talk about how you move through your discomfort, because you are now the representative of your spiritual community. And your spiritual community says everyone is welcome here. Your spiritual community says we love all people. So your discomfort cannot be used as an excuse to go below the standard of excellence that is expected. And then that leads to the third example, or the third thing to keep in mind under management of our welcome, our diversity welcome factor. And that third element is accountability. Now, don't get me wrong. When I say accountability, I'm not saying, oh, you have a greeter and they messed up and you need to get rid of them. That is not, in my opinion, accountability. Many of us have been affected by what's been called the cancel culture, but we're in spiritual communities and we're all about growth and we're all about expansion, right? So the first part of accountability is regular feedback. So when you see someone doing it right, that means you just quietly say to them, that was such a great example. Or you wait until after the event or after the Sunday service and you make a note of it. And afterwards you go up to them and say, can I talk to you for a minute? And then say, I just noticed when, that person, and describing that person, I just noticed how you looked them right in the eye and you offered to help them find a seat. And that was such a good example of what we're trying to do here to make sure that everyone feels welcome. And they're like, okay, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's all. I just wanted you to let you know I noticed. That's accountability in action for a leader. And yes, there may be times where you may have to correct someone or coach someone. And that too is accountability. So if you are responsible for leading a team that is modeling, being welcoming to all types of diversity, then management is really, really critical. So I've talked about motivation, management, and the third thing to keep in mind for your diversity welcome factor is meet and greet. And I include that here because our welcome folks really can show up in a lot of different ways in our spiritual communities. So sometimes and most often, it is when people arrive to an event or arrive at the beginning of a worship service or celebration service. And that's what we automatically think of. Who's our welcome team? And who are they likely to see come in the door? However, there are so many places where meet and greet actually applies. So I know of a few spiritual communities that actually have people, volunteers, meeting and greeting in the parking lot, welcoming people to today's event or to today's service, making sure they know from wherever they are parking how to get to the doors of the sanctuary or the doors of the education wing or the doors to the fellowship hall. And they will have people in the parking lot, and they may have people all along the way. So if you have a community where that makes sense, or where you have enough volunteers to do that, meeting and greeting is so critical. And of course, you need to have done the orientation under management. Yes, of course, you need to have described the motivation that I talked about first. But think about, expand your view of meet and greet. Where are people being met and where are they being greeted? Maybe before your event, or maybe before your service, if you have a Sunday service or a Friday service or a Saturday service, whatever your weekly or regular time is. Where else are people being met? Where are they being greeted, or where could they be greeted? So in my home community, we have a class. So if you come from a more traditional Christian background, you maybe grew up in a church where there was Sunday school, like Sunday school on Sunday morning, and then a service. So the spiritual community I'm a part of, we kind of have a metaphysical Sunday school. And so we realized a few years ago that there were people who come to the Sunday morning class, and they may or may not go to the Sunday service. And we had not been asking them to fill out a card with their information, letting us know how they'd like to stay in touch. We had not been giving them a tote bag or flyers about who we are, because it was kind of an assumption. Well, if they're coming to the class, they already know about who we are. And it's been so fascinating to watch since the decision was made to be sure on the Sunday morning class, which happens before our service, that there is someone from the greeting team who has resources with them and who is at the class, at the end of the class, to greet people, to answer questions, to offer them a tour, to be the official welcome to our spiritual community. Where could you do that in your spiritual community? And I also want to add just the example of, now that we are not all in physical community, how are you managing your meet and greet opportunities in a virtual community or a focus ministry where the events are all online and virtual? Do you have people assigned to monitor or host the chat and welcome people as they come in? Do you post links every 15 to 20 minutes saying, if you want more information, here's a link, or if you'd like to be on our mailing list, here's a link? Do you allow do you require that whatever the event is about, there is a welcome segment that gives the basics of your spiritual community's mission and vision? And do you, lastly, provide some opportunities for people who are participating virtually to greet one another and to be greeted by. So some communities have, after our service, we're virtual, but please stay because we go into breakout rooms and do 15 or 20 minutes to talk about today's focus. And then people get to know each other and have someone who is assigned to do the same role they would do if we were in person, making sure that everyone feels welcome and knows that they are part of this spiritual community. So those are the three things that I keep in mind when I am talking with others about or evaluating in my own community and on my own events, the diversity welcome factor. What is the motivation? What is the management? How is it being managed? And am I paying attention to specific points of meet and greet? I hope these three areas, and I hope what I've shared about them is helpful for you. I just want to give you the highlight. And this is a toolkit episode. So give you enough that you have some tools in your toolkit without taking you through the full 90-minute webinar or workshop on this topic. If you do have specific questions, please feel free to reach out to me or to put them in the chat, and I am happy to give you more information. Stay tuned for additional opportunities to flesh some of this out. There is a 6-week series coming up in June and the first part of July called the Inclusion Toolkit, where we'll be spending 6 Mondays actually going through some of not just the diversity welcome factor, but other aspects of what you can do to what tools you can have in your toolkit if you're really working intentionally to be more inclusive in your spiritual community. And if you've been doing that for a while and you want to go to a more advanced level, during the month of July on Tuesday mornings, I'll be facilitating Speak Up and Step Out to help you take your strategy for being inclusive and your skills to the next level. If either of those are of interest to you and you want more information, just go to Stained Glass Spirit on Facebook, and there are events that are set up, event tabs where you can read all the details and get more information. My name is Tracy Brown. I'm the author of Stained Glass Spirit and your host right here on the New Thought Media Network for Inclusive Church. I really hope that you are committed to creating spiritual communities where oneness does not require sameness. I'll see you again next Tuesday.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.